My sister and I were kidnapped at the same time. Beneath the mask, the kidnapper coldly asked my husband Adrian, of these two people, you can only take one away. Adrian pointed to my sister without hesitation, I choose her. As he held my terrified sister and turned to leave, he didn't even glance back at me. When the kidnapper's knife slowly cut open my clothes, I laughed. After being rescued by the police, I threw the signed divorce agreement in Adrian's face. He was furious. Rosalie has a heart condition and can't handle the shock. Do you have to make a fuss about this? I touched the scar on my face and calmly said, Adrian, sign it, and we'll be even. Summer, are you that eager? His voice carried a hint of frustration he himself didn't notice. I ignored him, as if he were just air. Fine. I'll sign. I'll sign right now. I calmly watched Adrian. His pen tip heavily scrawled his name at the end of the divorce agreement. Adrian threw the pen forcefully, making a piercing sound. I took the agreement that would determine the fate of the rest of my life, carefully folded it, and put it in my bag. Then I turned and left without the slightest reluctance. He chased after me, grabbing my wrist with such force it felt like he wanted to crush my bones. Where are you going? I'll take you. I forcefully shook off his hand, stepped back, and kept a safe distance from him. No need, Adrian. A flash of pained embarrassment crossed his handsome face. 3 years of marriage, and you have to be so heartless? His voice carried a tone of accusation, as if I were the one who had done wrong. I finally laughed. The laughter spilled from my throat, carrying indescribable sarcasm and sorrow. When Adrian chose Rosalie, wasn't that even more heartless than me? I looked up, staring straight at him. His face instantly turned ashen, as if his hypocritical mask had been torn off. She has a heart condition, the situation was critical. What could I do in that case? Besides, didn't I call the police to save you too? His brows furrowed tightly, suppressing the anger about to erupt. Summer, we don't have to become enemies. I looked at him, my eyes devoid of any ripples. We already are. From the moment he chose Rosalie without hesitation, we already were. He was completely choked by my words, all his prepared excuses stuck in his throat. Finally, that nameless rage broke through his reason. He turned angrily, without looking at me again, striding toward his car. The engine's roar was like the howl of a wounded beast, and soon, that expensive Bentley disappeared from my view. As soon as he left, my spine, taut like a bowstring, instantly relaxed. I leaned against the wall, exhaling a long, long breath. It was as if I were expelling all the grievances and pain of these 3 years at once. Ding dong, the bank's text message alert sounded particularly pleasant at this moment. I opened it. A huge sum of money, enough to ensure my financial security for the rest of my life, had been transferred to my account. I didn't take his company shares, I only wanted the money and a standalone courtyard house in the old city district. I slowly squatted down, burying my face in my knees. The kidnapper's lustful sneer, the burning pain like my lower body being torn apart, and the sensation of the cold blade slicing across my cheek once again vividly appeared before my eyes. Adrian, you don't know, do you? By the time you called the police, it was already too late. The moment you chose Rosalie, you personally pushed me into true hell. The physical wounds were their warning to me. But the wounds in my heart were the punishment you gave me, completely destroying me. That night, I moved directly into the courtyard house. The osmanthus trees in the yard were blooming perfectly, their faint fragrance calming the mind. For the first time in 3 years, I slept soundly. At 18, I was retrieved from the slums by my so-called biological parents. Dressed impeccably with elegant postures, they told me I was the Jiang family's biological daughter who had been switched at birth. I thought my life had finally seen the dawn, that I could escape the days of hunger and cold. But I didn't expect it was just stepping from one hell into another, beautifully packaged one. They said the fake heiress's parents had both passed away, so they wouldn't send her away, but their daily treatment was worlds apart. I lived in the smallest servant's room, with moldy walls, dark and damp. They made me eat the leftovers from the table, watching the fake heiress Rosalie pick and choose from the full table of dishes. "Dad, Mom, this lobster isn't fresh, I won't eat it." Alright, if Rosalie doesn't like it, don't eat it, Hannah, quickly clear it away." Then, that plate of almost untouched lobster became my extra meal that night. Watching the couple's meticulous pampering of Rosalie, and then looking at myself, I just found it laughable. Blood ties were worthless in the face of 20 years of nurturing affection. Actually, the one originally meant to marry Adrian was my sister Rosalie. They had been betrothed since childhood, a perfect match. But a sudden car accident caused Adrian, this favored son of heaven, to lose his male functionality and develop severe depression. From the clouds, he fell into the mud, becoming a half-cripple everyone avoided. The always proud Rosalie screamed in front of everyone that she didn't want to marry a eunuch. Thus, this blessing fell upon me. The whole family surrounded me, with Rosalie crying pitifully. Father, with a stern face, said the Jiang family's business relied entirely on the Gu family's support and couldn't break the engagement at this time. And my biological mother, holding my hand, cried and begged me. "Summer, Mom begs you, Rosalie has been spoiled since childhood and can't endure such grievances. Marry in Rosalie's place, and you'll be the great hero of our Jiang family." Looking at her face full of loving kindness, I just found it incredibly laughable. Was I born thick-skinned and deserving of all grievances? But they gave me no choice. After forcing me to drop out of school, the next day they bundled me up and stuffed me into the Gu family's wedding car. On the wedding night, he smashed everything in the room that could be smashed, pointed at my nose, and cursed me as a prostitute sent by the Jiang family to humiliate him. His eyes bloodshot, like a trapped beast, he pounced on me, forcibly tearing open my clothes. I was scared and trembling all over, yet I saw a man at his most vulnerable, most unbearable, deepest despair. He wanted to prove himself but found he was utterly powerless. At that moment, the madness in his eyes faded, leaving only an ashen silence and self-loathing. The room was in complete disarray. Looking at him, the fear in my heart surprisingly dissipated slowly, replaced by a strange sympathy. I didn't cry or make a fuss, I just walked over and calmly told him, "I can cure you." Life after marriage was no different from hell. A sexless marriage, for a man like Adrian who was once invincible, was non-stop torture day and night. His depression grew increasingly severe, his moods erratic, humiliating me in every way. He would flip the table over trivial matters, hot soup splashing on my arm, yet he wouldn't even glance at it. He would suddenly wake up in the middle of the night, choking my neck, asking if I was mocking him. I silently endured all this because I knew it was just his illness acting up. I began incorporating treatments subtly into his daily life. His meals were medicinal diets I carefully prepared, and the incense in the study was calming herbs I personally ground. Every night before he slept, I would give him a head massage to relieve his tense nerves. He went from initial resistance and smashing bowls, to later suspicion and scrutiny, and finally to silence and tacit acceptance. Because his body genuinely showed subtle improvements. He no longer suffered from insomnia all night, and his emotions gradually stabilized. Once, his depression flared up again, and he grabbed a paper cutter from the desk to slash his wrist. In desperation, I took out the silver needles hidden in my suitcase for the first time. He looked at me in shock. That night, I performed a complete acupuncture treatment on him for the first time. When I removed the last silver needle, I clearly saw that he felt a long-lost physiological response from his lower body. From that day on, he completely let down his guard and began to fully rely on my treatment. Our relationship also gradually changed. He would treat me kindly in a clumsy way, like a child who had done something wrong. He no longer smashed things, he would sit quietly in the study, watching me grind herbs for him, for an entire afternoon. He began to remember that I preferred light flavors, and spicy dishes no longer appeared on the table. He even gave me a set of out-of-print medical classics on my birthday, which he had specially commissioned someone to bid for at an overseas auction. During that time, Adrian's body basically recovered, and he regained his vitality. And I, hopelessly, began to fall in love with this somewhat clumsy, somewhat cute man. I thought the bitterness had ended, and sweetness had come, finally free. Just when Adrian held me for the first time, cautiously suggesting we consummate and have a child, Rosalie returned to the country. On the first day she returned, Adrian stayed out all night for the first time in 3 years. The next day, under the pretext of visiting, she brazenly moved into our marital home. She wore my silk pajamas, swirling a wine glass, using my favorite cup. She acted like the mistress of the house, while I became the unwelcome guest. I looked at Adrian, hoping for an explanation. But he just avoided my gaze and said lightly, "Rosalie just came back and isn't used to living outside, she has no place to stay temporarily." My heart, in that instant, plummeted from the warm sun of midsummer straight into the biting cold of winter. The medicinal meal I had personally prepared for him, simmered for 3 hours, was poured into the sink by Rosalie with a laugh. Pinching her nose with a face full of disgust, she said, "Adrian, this herbal smell is too awful. Don't drink this mumbo-jumbo stuff anymore." I looked at Adrian. He just frowned and said to Rosalie, "Don't fool around." But there was no hint of reproach. At that moment, I seemed to understand something. Rosalie said she wanted to start a business, and Adrian mobilized all his resources to support her unconditionally, investing in her projects and paving the way for her. The cause of this kidnapping was Rosalie's so-called entrepreneurial project. She squandered Adrian's investment recklessly, and the project quickly lost money. To shirk responsibility, she blamed all the problems on a project manager, forging evidence, leading to his bankruptcy, his son's death from serious illness without money for treatment, and his wife divorcing him. That manager went mad. So, the man driven insane chose the most extreme way to retaliate. He kidnapped Rosalie. And I, who just happened to go find Adrian that day, was treated as an incidental bonus and kidnapped along with her. We were locked in an abandoned warehouse. Adrian received the kidnapper's call and rushed over at the fastest speed. The kidnapper demanded 100 million in ransom. Adrian didn't hesitate and quickly transferred the money. Watching his anxious figure, a faint warmth unexpectedly arose in my heart. Perhaps he still cared about me. However, the kidnapper's next words plunged me into an ice cave. "Why only 50 million? Are you crazy? The bank can't produce that much cash at once. That's all that's in the account. I'll have to gather the rest slowly." He sneered and told Adrian, "Sorry, this money is only enough to save one person. Choose one of the 2 women in front of you." The warehouse was deathly silent. I looked at this man whom I had pulled back from hell bit by bit. I thought that 3 years of daily companionship, those shared memories of facing pain, that spiritual intimacy, could make me the unique, chosen exception. However, reality gave me the loudest slap in the face. He had almost no hesitation, firmly and without delay, walking toward Rosalie. "I choose her." Those 3 words were like 3 poison daggers, precisely stabbing into my heart. He carefully untied the ropes on Rosalie, holding the trembling woman tightly in his arms, softly comforting her. At this moment, he was so close to me, yet so far. When he held Rosalie and passed by me, not even the hem of his clothes touched me. Watching his departing back, my heart cooled inch by inch, frozen to ice, then shattered into powder. The kidnapper's knife slashed across my face, a sharp sting coming. Warm blood flowed down, but I felt no pain at all. So, the so-called healing, the so-called love, were nothing but my solo performance, my wishful thinking. I begged the robber who had already received the money to let me go. But he licked his lips, revealing a nauseating smile. "The money is my material compensation, as for you, consider it my spiritual compensation." His knife slowly cut open my clothes. When the police arrived, it started raining heavily outside. I squatted naked in the corner, my body still uncontrollably shaking. Rainwater mixed with blood and tears slid down my face. My lower body still bore the bloodstains and tearing pain from the violation. I never imagined that after 3 years of marriage, my first time would be handed over to someone else by my own husband. At that moment, I fully understood. Some people's hearts are made of stone, even if you warm them to the point of self-immolation, you can't heat them up. I contacted a familiar lawyer and drafted that divorce agreement. Adrian, we are even. The day after the divorce, my mom's call came chasing. As soon as the call connected, it was her hysterical ranting. She cursed me for being senseless, for ruining the Jiang family's future, for why I had to provoke Adrian's unhappiness. Finally, in a commanding tone, she told me to roll back immediately, kneel and apologize to Adrian, and beg for his forgiveness. I hung up the phone, then really went back to that villa. I went back not to apologize, but for a complete severance. In the living room, Adrian and Rosalie were intimately sitting on the sofa. Rosalie nestled in his arms, crying pitifully, repeatedly recounting how much shock she suffered in that kidnapping and how terrifying the experience was. My parents, my biological parents, were surrounding her, asking about her well-being with faces full of concern. As if she was the only one who had been kidnapped and hurt. Not one of them looked at me. Not one asked if I was injured. I was like a transparent outsider intruding into their happy family. The first to notice me was my mother. She screamed, pointing at my nose and cursing, "Summer, you're crazy. How can you bring up divorce at this time? Don't you know Rosalie just suffered a shock? You're too selfish." I laughed, as if hearing the funniest joke in the world. I laughed until tears uncontrollably flowed. I'm selfish? I wiped away the tears, my gaze coldly sweeping over each of them. Then what about when you forced me to drop out of school and substitute in the marriage? Weren't you selfish then? I took out my phone and pressed play. A recording clearly played in the dead silent living room. A wild girl from the countryside, marrying into the Gu family is your blessing. Don't be ungrateful. This was my father's stern reprimand. Rosalie is the treasure we've held in our palms for 20 years, we can't ruin her. Summer, just help the family. This was my mother's hypocritical plea. The living room instantly fell into deathly silence. My parents' faces turned from flushed red to pale white. Rosalie also stopped her clumsy performance, looking at me in disbelief. Word by word, I clearly declared to them, from today on, I, Summer, with you the Jiang family. Sever all ties. In front of them, I blocked all their contact methods. Then, without looking back, I left that nauseating place. At the fastest speed, I sold all the domestic properties Adrian compensated me with, converting them all to cash. Then I booked a flight ticket abroad. At the moment the plane took off, I looked at the city lights outside the window growing smaller, with no reluctance in my heart. Goodbye, Adrian. Goodbye, my ridiculous family. From now on, we have no more entanglements. With the huge sum from the divorce, I established my own integrated Chinese Western medicine laboratory abroad. Many people thought this money was an astronomical figure. But for me, my most precious wealth was never money. It was the unique clinical treatment experience accumulated over these 3 years on Adrian. He was like a living collection of complex medical conditions. Now, what I needed to do was transform that folk remedy originally tailored only for him into a standardized medical protocol that could benefit countless male patients. After I left, Adrian's physical condition, as I expected, plummeted. His depression relapsed, and it was more severe than before. His male functionality, which he was proud of, completely failed, returning to the desperate state of 3 years ago. He sought famous doctors from all over the world, spending countless amounts of money. But all doctors were helpless with him. They all said his previous recovery was itself a medical miracle that could not be replicated. Only then did Adrian belatedly realize, like a madman, that I, Summer, was his only, and lifelong only, medicine. And Rosalie, who made him abandon me, after his repeated failures, her eyes showed undisguised disgust and contempt. That look made every instance of his impotence in bed seem utterly cheap and ridiculous. He began frantically searching for me. Calling, texting, going to places I might have been before. But he couldn't find me. I had vanished like evaporated water. Finally, he somehow learned my whereabouts from a friend and immediately booked a flight to come over. When he found my laboratory, his face still carried a trace of his habitual, condescending superiority. He probably thought that as long as he appeared in front of me, I should gratefully pounce on him and beg him to take me away. However, he was politely stopped by the receptionist. "Sorry, sir, do you have an appointment?" "I'm here to see Summer." He frowned, unaccustomed to being blocked. "Sorry, Summer is in a meeting, no appointments, no visitors." The receptionist's formulaic response made his face darken instantly. He looked inside through the laboratory's huge glass window. Then, he saw me. I was wearing a neat white research suit, standing in the center of the conference room, confidently discussing fluently in English with a group of blonde, blue-eyed foreign experts. My face had delicate light makeup, my brows and eyes exuding an unprecedented radiance. It was a dazzling appearance he had never seen in the 3 years I cooked and cared for him. At that moment, for the first time, Adrian felt an emotion called panic. He realized that the canary he had caged had, at some point, broken free from its shackles and flown to a broader sky. And that sky was a height he could no longer reach. My research project progressed very smoothly but soon encountered a key bottleneck. To overcome this challenge, I needed technical support from an authoritative expert in neurosurgery. A name immediately came to my mind. My senior brother, Vincent. Back in medical school, he was godlike. Now, he is the youngest and most renowned neurosurgical expert internationally. With a try-it attitude, I sent him my project proposal and some core data via encrypted email. Unexpectedly, he replied the same day with just 4 words, "Wait for my return." The next day, he flew back from New York and appeared directly in my laboratory. When Vincent saw the 3 full boxes of clinical practice case data on Adrian over 3 years that I had organized, he was completely shocked. Looking at me, his eyes couldn't hide admiration and amazement. "Summer, you're a genius." He decided on the spot to join my laboratory fully with core technology as his stake. "Let's team up," he extended his hand, "and show the world what miracles the integration of Chinese and Western medicine can create." I shook his hand. "Okay." My collaboration with Vincent caused quite a stir in the industry. This news naturally spread back home. Rosalie felt an unprecedented sense of crisis and jealousy. It seemed in her perception, I should always be inferior to her. She resorted to old tricks, having paid marketing accounts smear me wildly online. Overnight, I became a charlatan with fake credentials, no medical license, scamming money through shady means. They said, how could someone expelled from university conduct medical research? They said I was just a discarded wife from a wealthy family, desperate for money. Adrian, seeing this overwhelming news, unusually called me. His tone was complex, carrying a subtle superiority and pity. "I saw the news online, I can help you clarify." He probably thought this was another opportunity he was bestowing upon me. Listening to his familiar voice on the other end, I just found it laughable. I sneered, my tone unmasking sarcasm. "No need. If Adrian has this leisure, better take care of your own body first." After saying that, I hung up directly. The busy tone came. Adrian held the phone, stunned in place. He couldn't understand how I dared to speak to him in this attitude. He couldn't understand even more how, in just a few months, I had become like this. The online attacks on me intensified under Rosalie's monetary offensive. Insulting labels like unlicensed miracle doctor, the shocking scam of the discarded wealthy wife, and so on, stuck firmly to me. Countless uninformed netizens flooded my social accounts, cursing and personally attacking me. Amid this chaos, my mentor from school days, a highly respected authority in the medical field, suddenly spoke out for me. He posted my graduation thesis from back then, which had been rated as the most imaginative student paper in the past decade due to its overly advanced views. Following that, my classmates and roommates from back then also came forward. They posted articles I published in international core journals during university, proving my academic ability far surpassed my peers. They also said that my dropping out back then was not due to poor grades but forced suspension due to family reasons. The direction of public opinion began to subtly shift. And at this time, Vincent held a small media conference abroad in his personal capacity. Facing countless flashes, he was composed and graceful. He publicly announced that he would deeply collaborate with my laboratory as a technical partner, and openly stated that my research was an epoch-making innovation in the field of neural regeneration, a great project capable of changing the destinies of countless families. The weight of this statement was as heavy as Mount Tai. Public opinion exploded instantly, completely reversing. Everyone was stunned. The public began to wildly wonder who this summer was, whom the god-level expert Vincent praised so highly. Now, without me doing anything, the omnipotent netizens began spontaneously digging deep. Soon, someone uncovered the sensational kidnapping case news from back then. Then, new questions arose. Why, in the same kidnapping, did Adrian only save Rosalie? What kind of princess is this Rosalie that the other one deserved to die? Even more, someone directly exposed Rosalie's so-called heart disease lie. She has heart disease? Then what about the photos exposed of her renting out a nightclub and partying wildly the week before the kidnapping? In the photos, she had heavy makeup, holding a wine glass, laughing happier than anyone. Where was the slightest appearance of a heart patient? The lie was exposed. The wind direction completely changed. Those accounts that once cursed me began quietly deleting comments. Everyone realized they might have been used as tools. In this farce, who the real clown was became self-evident. Just as Rosalie and Adrian were overwhelmed by the opinion reversal, heavier truth hammers smashed down one after another. The true inside story of the kidnapping was exposed. The parents of the project manager framed by Rosalie, leading to his family's ruin, released online a recording of Rosalie's arrogant and life-disregarding phone call from back then. In the recording, she sarcastically mocked the other's incompetence and viciously said, "It's just losing some money, what's the big deal? Anyway, my brother Adrian has my back. His wife running away is none of my business? He couldn't keep his wife, serves him right. If you dare bother me again, I'll make sure your whole family can't survive in a city." This recording instantly ignited fury across the entire internet. Following that, an old nanny from the Jiang family back then also came forward. Facing the camera, she cried while recounting how after I was brought back to the Jiang family, I lived worse than the servants. She said I ate leftovers and wore Rosalie's discarded old clothes. She also confirmed how the Jiang family used threats and inducements to force me to drop out and marry the then crippled Adrian in Rosalie's place. Piece by piece, the sufferings I had endured were publicly exposed in the most tragic way. However, for Adrian and Rosalie, the most fatal blow was yet to come. A video of Rosalie partying wildly with her best friends during her studies abroad suddenly went viral online. In the video, she had exaggerated smoky makeup, cigarette in hand, fooling around with a group of people. Facing the camera, she laughed drunkenly, "I'm not marrying that dead eunuch. What is the Gu family? Make me marry and guard a living widow? Let my stupid sister from the countryside go, haha. Maybe she'll have to use her hand." Kills me laughing. This video exploded like an atomic bomb on the internet. Every word was like a poisoned knife, precisely stabbing into Adrian's heart. The 3 words "dead eunuch" became an indelible label, firmly branded on the forehead of him, the president of the Gu group. The whole internet was frantically forwarding and mocking. Adrian, this once lofty man, overnight became the biggest laughingstock in the world. The day after the video was exposed, the Gu group's stock price plummeted in response, evaporating hundreds of billions almost in a diving posture instantly. Adrian, this man who once stood at the top of the pyramid, wherever he went, could feel others' strange gazes. Those looks mixed with sympathy, contempt, and mockery made him experience a taste of public execution worse than physical disability. Like a completely enraged lion, he returned home, threw all of Rosalie's things out of the villa, and drove her out of the Gu family like a stray dog. Losing the protection of the Gu family's big tree, plus the exposure of previous evil deeds, the Jiang family's retribution came. All partners collectively announced termination of contracts, and banks came to collect debts. That once infinitely glorious Jiang enterprise almost overnight declared bankruptcy. And Adrian sat alone in the empty office. He watched that video that made him lose all face over and over again. Watching Rosalie's unrestrained mockery on it, then thinking of my obscure efforts and gentle companionship over those 3 years. For the first time, he felt what bone-piercing pain was. He wanted to destroy everything. He wanted to smash the computer, throw the phone, destroy the whole world. But what he most wanted to destroy was the stupid self who chose Rosalie back then. Regret flooded him like a tide, making him almost unable to breathe. He began frantically calling me, texting, but all contact methods had been blocked by me. Finally, like grasping the last straw, he booked a flight again, desperately, madly flying to find me. He thought that as long as he turned back, I would definitely wait in place. He thought that as long as he apologized sincerely enough, I could act as if nothing happened. He was wrong. Terribly wrong. When he found me, I was at the award ceremony of the World Medical Summit held in Switzerland. Under the spotlight, I won the annual Medical Innovation Gold Award for the Neuron Regeneration Activation Project. I wore a starry sky-colored gown custom-made for me by Vincent, standing in the center of the stage under everyone's attention. By my side was the equally excellent Vincent, his gaze toward me gentle and focused. I delivered my acceptance speech confidently and calmly in fluent English. While Adrian, dressed in suit and tie but unable to hide his disheveled state, was stopped by security at the outermost perimeter of the venue. He stood there in the shadows, like a pitiful and tragic shadow, looking up at my radiant glory. Looking at me, who once belonged to him but was pushed away by his own hands. After the ceremony, he rushed out from somewhere, blocking me in the backstage corridor. He grabbed my hand, his eyes particularly bloodshot from being filled with red veins. "Summer, I was wrong, I really was wrong." His voice was hoarse, carrying a hint of pleading. "Come back, okay? Come back with me, I'll give you the goo group. I'll give you everything I have." I looked at him as if watching a clown performing comically. I gently but irrefutably withdrew my hand. I looked at him like a stranger with no relation to me. "Adrian, speaking of which, I have to thank you." I smiled slightly, my tone calm and unruffled. "Thank you for providing such valuable, detailed first-hand clinical data for my project." As thanks, I paused, looking at his instantly pale face, and said word by word, extremely clearly, "When my product officially launches, I can give you a 20% discount. To let you have the chance to become a real man again." My words, like the sharpest knife, tortured his last dignity to shreds. At this moment, Vincent stepped forward, unobtrusively protecting me behind him. He raised our interlocked hands. On my ring finger, a brilliant diamond ring shone with happy light under the lamps. Vincent looked at the stunned Adrian, his voice gentle yet firm. "Sorry, Mr. Adrian. My fiancé has been busy all day and needs rest." Adrian's gaze fixed deadly on that ring, as if struck by lightning. His body swayed, the whole person completely frozen in place. His world, at that moment, collapsed with a boom. A few years later, the summer biotech company I founded successfully went public, becoming a global top medical tech giant. My marriage with Vincent was happy and fulfilling. We had a smart and cute daughter, her eyes like mine, her smile very much like Vincent's. The Jiang family, who had done much evil back then, also got their due retribution. The Jiang parents, after bankruptcy, lived in poverty and finally died of illness in a dark, damp low-rent house, with no one by their side when they died. Rosalie was sentenced to prison for commercial fraud and multiple malicious slanders, spending the rest of her life in jail. And Adrian never remarried. He never recovered from that illness again. The drug I developed could cure men all over the world, but uniquely couldn't cure him. Because heart disease has no medicine. He became a lone person living in huge shadows. The only thing he did every day was sit in the empty study, collecting all news and reports about me. On his study wall hung a huge photo. It was a photo taken by a reporter when I stood on the World Medical Summit podium receiving an award. In the photo, I was confident, beautiful, with a brilliant smile. That was me, the light he could never touch again. He often had hallucinations. As if returning to an afternoon many years ago. The sunlight just right, the breeze mild. I was sitting by his side, head down, focused on applying needles to him. Sunlight sprinkled on my profile, plating a layer of soft golden light, gentle beyond words. Only at this moment did he finally understand. What I brought him was never just hope for physical recovery. Those 3 years were the closest his barren life had been to love and redemption. But he personally pushed his God into the abyss. And for himself, forever locked the door to hell. For the rest of his life, no liberation,